with you this morning. It's been kind of a rough weekend for me in this congregation, and my heart's broken for those who have lost loved ones. I know some of these families have known them for so many years, and it just breaks my heart, as it does all of you, and we grieve with them. You know, I think identity is a real issue in our world. Who are we? You know, I think that's a question that maybe you've asked yourself at some point in your life. Who am I? Really? You know, who am I? And you know, it seems like you come up with a lot of different answers for that. You could say a lot of different things, define yourself. Even in the Bible, when we talk about God, a lot of the words in the Old Testament for God are descriptive words. You know, El Roi, the God who sees, the God who provides, the God who supplies, all kinds of different descriptions. And sometimes when we define ourselves, that's how we define ourselves in a descriptive sense. You know, who am I? Well, I'm different things to a lot of different people. You can put a lot of different titles on me, and some of those and all those would probably fit. But at the end of the day, is that really who I am? And I think that identity becomes so important, and especially as we get older in life, identity becomes important because a lot of the things that really define us seem to sort of start to disappear, and we sometimes kind of back up and think, well, who am I really? You know, what am I really? What am I? How would you describe me? And in Matthew 16, Jesus asked that question, didn't he? He asked that question. He says, who do people say the Son of Man is? And then he said to them, but who do you say that I am? Who am I to you? You know, I think that's really kind of an important statement. Who am I to you? You know, if you've got a child, to them, you're their parent. If you have a job, you're a coworker. If you own a business, you can be a business owner. Maybe you've got a title with your name, and those titles sometimes stay with us and define us over the course of our life, and we never get away from that. You know, when I think about Gary, you know, Gary's a doctor, and Gary's not a practicing doctor anymore, and I don't think Gary even has his doctor's license anymore. But when you talk to people in this town, it's Gary, oh, the doctor. You know, that's a title that's going to be with him his whole life till he dies. He's going to be the doctor because that's the definition of him to a lot of people. That's his status. That's who he is. A lot of times we define ourselves by social status. And what I mean by that is it's a position that we occupy, and it can be good or bad. You know, socially, how do people view you? How do people define you? And I think when you look at that, there's three types of status, three types of a social status. And one of them is ascribed. It's something I can't do anything about. I'm a white male old man, you know. I mean, that's me, right? And according to 23andMe, I'm 99% European. Just throwing that out there, but there's nothing I can do about that. I can't change my DNA, can't rewrite who I am, I can't change that. I'm going to be an old, white-headed man till I die, you know, that's just it. I mean, that's me. I can't change that. It's ascribed to me. It's how God made me, how God created me, and I can't change that. Although some people today want to try to change that, we shouldn't try to change that, right? Because God made us that way. God created us that way, and it's something that I can't change. I can't change that I'm an American. I can't change that I was born in the United States. I can't change those things. Those are things that are me. They define me, and I can't change that. But on the other hand, there's an achieved status, things that I earned throughout my life, and those can be good things, and they can be bad things. You can be a title. It can be a doctor or a lawyer or a mother or a housemaker. You can be all these different things, or you can be a business owner. But you can also be a criminal or a child molester or a rapist, right? I mean, those are things that due to your life, those are statuses that you achieve, the way people see you, who you are, and those are things that we kind of make for ourselves in our lives as we go along. We kind of create those. But then there's what's called a master status. And that's really what I want to talk about today. It's what supersedes everything else. It cuts across every other status that we hold. It defines our being. It's the answer to the question, who am I? Who am I? And if we can figure that out, it can change our lives. Because if you don't know who you really are, how can you expect people to respect you? How can you expect people to really know you? How can you expect, if you really don't have an identity, then you can be carried away with a lot of different things. You have to know who you are. How many people have you known in your life? I guess I should say I've known people in my life. I've known people in my life that got married at a young age, had children, had a family. The children left. I go to see them on the street, and they say, we're getting a divorce. And I'll say, what happened? You've been married for 25 years. What happened? Well, the kids left, and we just look at each other and don't know what to do with each other anymore. You know, they forgot who they were. They forgot their identity. They forgot who they were as a couple, their identity as a couple. It ceased to exist. Their identity was their children. How many people have you known that were career-oriented and held a job, and that job was important to them, whatever that might be, their entire life? And they retire from that job, and then a month or two later, you read their obituary, and you're like, what happened? There was a gentleman in this congregation, and this story still breaks my heart, and he lost his wife, and when his wife passed, I had a conversation with him, and he told me, he says, I don't even know where the checkbook is. He says, I don't even know how much money's in the bank account. I don't know anything. And I went to see him a month or two later, and he was sitting in his house in the dark, just sitting there. And I said, what? And I said, how are you, brother? And he said, well, I just don't know. Just don't know who I am. And then a month or so later, he just passed away. You know, the truth is that if we don't have an identity within ourselves, when anything in our life takes away that identity that we believe we have, it can destroy us. We can be influenced by people around us. When somebody attacks you, or somebody verbally attacks you, or somebody maligns you, and you don't really know who you are, it carries you away. You start to believe that you could be that person, that maybe you are as bad as they say. But if you have that identity within yourself, and you know exactly who you are, regardless of what somebody can say to you or what anybody can do to you, you know who you are. You know what you are. You know in your heart who you really are, and it doesn't matter what they say. They can't change what you are. You are that person. And I believe it's so important that we have this status within our life, because it shapes our concept and it shapes our life choices. It really begins to define who we are. It's the most important aspect of our identity. It's what makes me me. And it gives us self-perception. You know, if I stripped away every layer of myself and one at a time, being a father, that's part of me. I mean, I'm a father, and if you took that away from me, I'm a husband, and if you took that away from me, right? I'm a mechanic. You know, you could take that away. I'm a business owner. You could take that away. I'm a preacher. You could take that away. And when you stripped all those things away that I am, all those statuses that I am in my life, and you stripped it all down to just Rex, what do you have left? If my life is just those things that I am to everybody else, then what am I to me? What am I to Rex? What am I to God? And I think that's a question that inevitably we really have to come to terms with. It affects how we behave. It affects how we think. It affects our life. I need to know with confidence, who I really am. And for you to know me, I have to know me. I have to respect me. I have to have a basis of what I am and who I am and what I belong to and whose I am, and those things have to be important to me. Because if we strip all that away, we sometimes are lost. We're lost. We're lost without that job, or we're lost without that spouse. You know, marriages, sometimes people even stay in abusive relationships, terrible relationships. And they're like, why do you do that? Why do you stay in that relationship? Because I don't know who I am without it. I don't want to be alone. I don't know who I am without that in my life. Even as bad as it is, without that, who am I? Who am I without that? Our children sometimes, and our spouses, our work environment, those things that define us, that give us value, that give us worth. We want that. We want to be worth something to somebody, don't we? We want to have value. And sometimes we search for that in what goes on around us. Paul had an ascribed status, didn't he? He was a Hebrew. He was a Pharisee. He was a Israelite. He was a persecutor of the church. Paul had all these things that he said, these defined me. This is who I was. This is what I was about. If you ask me, who's Paul? Well, Paul's that persecutor of the church. Who's Paul? He's that guy that kills Christians. Who's Paul? He's that guy that was raised at the feet of Gamaliel. Who's Paul? He's a Hebrew. He's the tribe of Benjamin. Those are things that define Paul. They made him who he was. And when Jesus came into his life, Jesus says, you can't be that person anymore. You've got to change. You have to change your status. You have to change what you're about. And Paul says in Philippians 3, he says, whatever things were gained to me, those things I've counted as loss. I count all things to be lost to be the surpassing value of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and count them but rubbish, so that I may gain Christ. See, Paul changed who he was. Paul changed his status. And Paul said, for all those things before Christ, all that I had don't mean anything to me now. They were rubbish. Rubbish. They don't mean a thing. You see, God's about changing who we are. But God's more than about changing who we are. He's about knowing who we are. God created us. He made us. He knows us. And He wants us to know ourselves. He wants us to know Him. And He wants us to become Him. Paul said, that I may know Him in the power of His resurrection, in the fellowship of His sufferings, being conformed to His death. You see, Paul's master status changed. What made Paul Paul? What defined Paul changed. And when it changed his life. It changed his view on the world and his view on everything. When I was thinking about this sermon, and this is actually a sermon I preached many, many years ago, back in 13 or something, I revamped it. I told Jay I'd really been thinking about this, and it's because I've had 2 or 3 people in my life lately that they're so lost. They've retired from jobs. Maybe it's my age, I don't know. Their kids have left the house. That's kind of a hole, isn't it, when your kids leave, when the last one walks out the door and you don't have children running around anymore. That's a pretty big hole. Susie was crying, I was waving. But it's a big hole either way, right? And the truth is there's so many things in our life that become so much a part of our life that when we lose them, it leaves a hole that's just hard to fill. And we got people in this congregation that are experiencing that with the loss of a loved one, loss of loved ones. But there's other grief in your life besides losing someone that you love. Grief comes in so many different forms. You can grieve over losing a job, or you can have grief over your children leaving, or there's so many different things in life that we can grieve over. And we don't really look at it that way. If you've ever lost a house, or your house has ever burned to the ground, and people can grieve over a house, you can grieve over so many things, and grief affects us. And at the end of that process, at the end of what we're going through, a lot of that comes down to my value, my self-worth. Who am I? How do I respond? How do I act? Who should I be? And those are questions that you have to answer. You know, if we look at this idea a little bit in Matthew, a little further down, I really love this passage. And he says, Simon Peter answered. He says, who am I, right? Who do you say that I am? And Peter answered him. He says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. But I love Jesus' response. Jesus said, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did this reveal to you, my Father's heaven. But I say, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build myself. And I love how Jesus, he says, who am I? And he says, you're the Son of God. And then Jesus said, and you're Peter, and you're not a fisherman anymore. You know what? I never really read that verse this way, but isn't that really what he's telling him? He says, you're Peter, and you're not a fisherman anymore. You're gonna start this church. I'm going to give you the keys of the kingdom. You're going to open up the kingdom to everybody. I'm changing your status. I'm changing who you are. I'm changing what's important to you. And Peter went from every day waking up and thinking the most important thing in his life was being a fisherman and catching those fish, to thinking, now I'm going to open the kingdom. Now I'm going to catch men. God changed who he was. God changed his status, didn't he? He changed what he was about. And you and I as Christians, we should have a status in our lives that carries us through all the transitions of our life, something that's constant within our life, something that never changes. You know what I love about math? I'm not an English guy. Those of you that know me, you know that. Not an English guy, but I'm a math guy. You know why? Because 2 plus 2 is always 4. 2 plus 2 is 4 when Noah built the ark. 2 plus 2 will be a 4 when Jesus comes again. It's never going to change. It's constant. I like things that are constant, that don't change. And my God is that way. My God doesn't change, does he? And if my master status is in Christ, if my master status is within God, then it's going to carry me through all these transitions in my life that I go through. It's going to carry me through things that I lose. It's going to carry me through people that I lose. It's going to carry me through jobs. It's going to carry me through children. It's going to carry me through retirement. It's going to carry me to the grave. That's the one thing in my life that I know is Rex. And when you strip everything away at the end of the day, and you strip everything away that I am and everything that I am to different people, at the end of the day, I belong to Christ. And that defines me. That's my status. That affects how I view the world and how I view other people. It affects decisions that I make. It is my master status, and it needs to be your master status. When our master status is ourself, and a lot of the world, that's what we think, isn't it? We live in a world that says, do what's best for you, right? Satisfy you, don't we? That's what our world says. It's what it tells you every single day. It not only tells you that, it tells you deserve it, doesn't it? You know those commercials on TV? They're telling you do this because you deserve it. Well, I don't really deserve much of anything, I don't believe, but that's what people want us to think, don't they? You deserve it. You deserve a break today, right? But when our self is in there, our identity is in us. And when that happens, it's really a problem because I change. I'm not constant. I'm not 2 plus 2 equals 4. I'm English. I before, whatever that is. I before E except after C sometimes when it's convenient. And that doesn't work very good, right? I have a self-centered view of the world. I think of the world through my eyes, through what's good for me, through what benefits me. I have a self-centered priority, don't I? My priorities are just about Rex, just about me, just about what makes me happy, just about what I want. You see the problem with all this? And people go through life and they think, well, I'm not happy. I need to do something to make myself happy. I need to change myself. I need self-help. I need one of those books, Rex for Dummies, right? So that I can fix Rex. because Rex is just broken, and Rex needs a lot of help. And so let's concentrate on Rex. I have a self-centered way of life. But you see, all that stuff is wrong. That view of the world, that view of the world wants you to have is wrong. A perfect Rex is not good enough to get to heaven. Perfect Rex. What's a perfect Rex? I don't even know what a perfect Rex is. Nobody would want to see that, right? I don't want to be a perfect Rex because everything about that doesn't work. I want to be a perfect God. I want to be Jesus. I want people to see Jesus in me. You know, if I can just look like Jesus, right? That's good enough. If my master status is Christ, you know, you could put a lot of things. I go to cemeteries. I'm at cemeteries more than I want to be, trust me. A lot of tombstones, cemeteries, and you're sitting there waiting for somebody to get there and reading tombstones. That's what I do. Go through there and read tombstones, and I see all these things: loving father, loving husband, loving wife. And I think, you know, if you're going to put something on my tombstone, I hope you just put Christian. Because when you strip everything away from me at the end of the day, that's what I want to be. You know, Paul says in Galatians, he says, I've been crucified with Christ, and it's no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself up for me. You know, Jesus becomes my master status. It becomes who I am. When people get on to me, when they get in a tough situation, or somebody criticizes me, or somebody says something to me, you know, it doesn't even bother me anymore. Because I know who I am. When I'm in my marriage and I'm with my wife, I still know who I am. When I'm around my children, I still know who I am. I have confidence in me. And I know if you take away my job and you take away everything that you define me by, that I'm still going to be Rex. I'm still going to be Christ. I'm still going to look like him, because that's who I have to be. That's who you have to be. Purpose in life. We all want purpose. We all want value. We want somebody to need us. The worst thing in life is not having any value. It's feeling worthless, feeling powerless, feeling like you aren't needed at all. That's the worst thing that can ever happen. And we do that, don't we? And we do that to people, and we take our elderly and we shuffle them to the side, or we take our children and we make them feel like they're not important or they're not necessary. And when we do that, we take away their value. We take away their purpose in life. And when you take that away from somebody, they wither up and they die. And my purpose has to be something that is constant, something that's 2 + 2 till I die, and that has to be Jesus. Because at whatever stage I'm in my life, Christ is going to drive me. Christ is going to motivate me. Christ is going to make me who I am. If Jesus is my master status, then all my identity centers around him. All my identity becomes wrapped up in him. My view of the world becomes wrapped up in Jesus. We live in this world that's full of hate and full of war and full of pain and full of suffering. And the world has all these answers to it, but they're not the answers that Christ has. You know, I get so caught up sometimes in that, and in the world, and I see these wars going on. I see this conflict going on. I see all this hate. And sometimes you just get caught up in that, and you just think, it's just hate. But if you're in Christ, you realize that love is the only thing that's going to save this world. Your view of the world isn't about the structure of the earth or what's going on or global warming or any of those things. Your view of the world is that it's a world full of people who need Jesus Christ. If you're Jesus-centered, then your priorities become Christ-centered. What's important to you? Caring for other people, loving for other people, compassion. Your way of life changes. Your identity changes. Who am I? I know whose I am. I know who I want to look like. Who am I? At the end of the day, I just want to be a Christian. I think that's enough. Because Jesus said, just look like me. Don't look like the world. Don't look like somebody you admire. Don't look like you think you need to look. At the end of the day, look like me. At the end of the day, if you look like Jesus, and people really know you and they look at you, they're going to say, there goes a Christian. There goes somebody who looks like Christ. Don't get lost in this world. It's so easy to get lost. It's so easy to get tied up in titles and jobs and things and relationships that we get lost. And when we lose those things that are so important to us, we just wither away. Put something in your life that's constant. Something in your life that's going to be the same when you're a teenager or a child or when you're a young adult or a mother or a father or a grandfather or retired or sitting in a nursing home. It's still going to be the same. Jesus Christ. If we all could just look like Jesus. If we all could just look like Jesus. What a wonderful world this would be. Amen. If we could help you in any way, wouldn't you let it be known while we stand and sing?